Hey there everyone, and welcome to the start of my annual review series for 2022. This covers all the monsters that came out in the last year. It goes from anniversary to anniversary, so it's coming up to the end of October 2022. This is a couple of months later, just because it takes me a bit of time to put everything together. However, they are all ready now, so I'll be releasing them once a week from here on. And so, going to the end of the anniversary, this is up until the 7th anniversary, so it's covering that 7th year of the game. And yeah, we're gonna review everything that came out in the year before that. So the structure I'm going to do for this is the same as what I did last year. So Earth is going to cover some of the major changes from updates. First of all, before we go into the monsters from this element, the Fire video is going to cover the cycles. There were 2 super epic cycles that came out this year: the Elfin Dragons and the Gummy Dragons. So I'm going to talk about those cycles in depth in that video. The next 3, Holy, Shadow and Storm, are just going to cover the monsters in those elements. And then Water is going to start off normal, but then it's going to end with kind of like some summary type stuff. So the structure for this particular video, we're going to talk about those major changes from updates, first of all. Also some, data analysis type stuff on some of the data which I put together. And then we're going to go to the normal kind of structure where we're going to talk about the overview and the themes in Earth. And then we're going to talk about the new monsters, going through the super epics, legendaries, mythics, that kind of order. And then we're going to talk about the highlights in Earth from this year and the power level of the new monsters in Earth. This year I've classified as the year of union. There are a few different things which I could have classified it as. I'm going to talk about that more in the Water video when you're going to see it at the end. But basically, union I think is now starting to become more well established in the game. And there's a few monsters which I would say make me want to call this the year of union, which, like I said, we'll find out at the end because I don't want to spoil the new monsters. We're going to talk about them. So first off is to talk about the updates which came out in this year. I've got a few highlights pointed out here. There's a thread in the forum. I think it's Near Monsters version update history or something like that. I'll have it linked in the description just so you can find it more easily. And that covers all the updates as well as extra notes which I add because the updates aren't always including everything. Some bugs and other random stuff if they get something slightly incorrect. So if you want to see what came out in all the updates, you can go read it there. This is just some of the highlights, some of the most important things that came out. So the first one here is the Gold Egg revamp. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, we've got the special eggs, the limited time eggs, the festival eggs. All that stuff is the normal kind of structure. And for all the sort of preceding years of the game, the gold egg is a kind of standard egg that's always there. It's the one that you're forced to hatch in right at the beginning of the game, and it's just kind of got the standard egg pool stuff. Now, they've changed the egg pools over the years, so what the gold egg has had, it's got some monsters that are a little bit unique to it, because they've been removed from elsewhere. They are in the shop, but they're also in there. It's hard for me to keep track of all the monsters that they do this with, but basically there's some monsters which are kind of unique to the gold egg, that you can't really find them in other places anymore. But the big thing they did this year is now we have 2 a day, 2 different gold eggs, and they feature a particular mythic from the standard pool. So previously it was just like equal chance on everything. You can hatch on it if you want. You get random standard pool mythics, you get random standard pool legendaries, some legendaries which are a bit unique to it. But there wasn't like a big reason to do it. So it was really smart of them to change that so that now we can go for particular standard pool mythics that we want. Especially because now there's a load of mythics in the standard pool. Our chance of actually awakening them, it will take years. Like, you'll just get a random one copy of them randomly every year or so. So, to actually awaken them takes a lot of time and just random luck. So now we've got the gold egg that we can target specific standard pool mythics if we want to get that standard pool mythic. It also means that they don't have to feature them in the limited time eggs, because previously it was an issue. People wanted to awaken standard pool mythics, but the only way you could do that was just random chance, so they had to feature them in the limited time eggs, which then meant that the limited time mythics couldn't get featured quite so frequently because they had to compete. It's all a bit awkward. You can see what's going on there. So the gold egg, great idea, really good system, and I'm glad they've got that in there now. PvP meta nerfs. Obviously, this is a really big topic. I can't go talking through all of them, so just some random highlights. Energy, there was this really fast energy setup that you could do where you could swift charge ally from a 90-something% speed Nautacruiser onto an Aurelius, which is like 82-84% speed, and then that can Plasma Blast to piercing kill 2 enemies. They put a restriction from the start of battle on the Swift Charge ally to stop that from happening. It wasn't too overpowered, but it was very strong in the lower tiers of PvP. So fair enough, they stopped that like 2-monster combo that was a bit too strong. The Abyss Soldiers, so Poseidon basically was a bit too strong. They reduced its speed, they made it slower at giving turn, so that's a bit less oppressive. It's still very good though, probably does need a bit more of a nerf, but that's discussion in the community right now. The Dolphins, they used to get plus 50% stats on both attack and defense. They've now split it, so some Dolphins get the attack boost, some Dolphins get the defense boost. It's that and some other nerfs have really wrecked some Dolphins, that the setup is nowhere near as good as it used to be, which I think is a slight shame, but they were extremely common when, once we got all 6 Dolphins, the setup just became very strong, so it's not too surprising. The other one I wanted to mention that isn't here is Link Slayer Bane All, which they put a restriction. Instead of it being 100 seconds from the start of battle, it's now 100 seconds from the start of the monster's turn, which has really strongly, harshly affected those Link Slayer Bane All monsters. Probably a good thing, because the more monsters we get in the game, the easier it becomes to pull off strong Link setups. That powerful Link payoffs kind of can be a bit too much. But anyway, that was one of the things that happened. So the third one here, stun nerfs. So stun has forever been like a massive mechanic in the game, especially in PvP, and so they decided to do some pretty heavy nerfs. Whether it's been in the right way, it's hard to say, but yeah, basically they made Shocking Entrance be 100 seconds rather than 120. That's good. You know, they originally, it used to be 160 seconds. They reduced it from 160 to 120, and then this year, 120 to 100. It makes some of them less oppressive. Something like Glorionyx that can like pull itself back and stuff doesn't loop that quite so easily. And yeah, just a bit better. Notably, there are some monsters which still have like 120 seconds, like Hanari, because she has a unique version of Shocking Entrance. That is still 120 seconds. You know, so these nerfs kind of hit some things, not others. Also, Stun Pulse got nerfed, so it's no longer 50 seconds, it's 100 seconds, which is brutal for some monsters. I mean, I just said the Dolphins are made weaker. Well, Dolphinix, the fire one, that got a massive buff from Dolphin Bond, because the higher attack for Time Strike Double was really good. With its change this year, it now only has the defense buff, so it doesn't have the high damage on Time Strike Double. And then also, the Stun Grenade has become 100 seconds rather than 50 seconds, so it doesn't give the stun control it used to. Dolphinix is really bad now, unfortunately. So yeah, anyway, there's a lot of other monsters which have been really badly affected by the Stun Pulse nerf. I do think Stun Pulse is kind of more balanced, being 100 seconds when it stuns for 200. But it does mean that all the Time Strike setup stuff just doesn't work. So we'll have to see. I think their plan is they will, in the following year, this next year coming, they will make Time Strike be slightly different or redesign some of those movesets so they still have a way to get a kill. But anyway, that's what they nerf with stun. Any nerfs to stun are good for the game, really. We do need some nerfs going on with it. The other thing is poison nerfs. These are pretty big. So basically, triple Poison Eater became 250 seconds rather than 200. Poison Gas went from 50 seconds to 70 seconds. That affects quite a few monsters. It also means that Purify is faster than Poison Gas, which is the main reason why it happened. Because it's a bit annoying them both being the same seconds. It's kind of unintuitive that you just keep purifying every time they Poison Gas rather than being able to do other stuff. They also made Link Double Poison Eater go from 100 seconds to 160 seconds, as well as Link Poison Eater going from 50 to 70, stuff like that. So they slowed down a bunch of the poison moves, and they slowed down Poison Gas, which means that poison is far less oppressive. It was too easy, especially with Magma Gund, to just chain kill through the enemy team. I mean, Magma Gund is just it was super overpowered. The last thing they nerfed with Poison is they made Poison Storm have a 100 second restriction from the start of the battle. So it was previously possible to use, say, Molten Pea to Poison Storm, poison all the enemies, and then just start your Poison Sweeping at relatively high speed. So now you've got to do it in less convenient ways. There's a few things that are missed from some of these nerfs, like on the stun nerfs, that still can be used in this way, but ultimately, like, you know, most of this stuff, it's been nerfed a bit harder to use. The next thing is Accelerate buff. So this is something that was very subtly done at the anniversary, which we just had, and that is Accelerate now always reduces by the percentage it's meant to reduce by. So previously, if you had a move that was 100 seconds and you accelerated by 20%, it would go down to 80. However, if you had it +9, so it was already 85 seconds, then if you accelerated, it would not be reduced by 20% of 85. It would be like 17.6% of 85, something like that. So you got sort of slight diminishing returns the more bonus you had on the monster. Now they've made it just flat rate, so it does reduce it by 20%. So with 85, that's like 17, so it reduces it to 68, if I did my maths correct there. So it reduces it to 68, previously it was to 70. So Accelerate just got slightly stronger, which is nice, and it's nice that it makes more sense now. I don't know why they didn't do this before, but yeah, there you go. And then these last two ones, these are really big things that came out this year. We got a free Mythic and a free Legendary. So every year we tend to get a free Legendary, and this year we got a free Mythic as well. Chronoceros was poorly outdated, so becoming Chronozillion is really, really good. And Mantis Samurai is a pretty accessible Legendary that is very, very strong. So having these two, very big deal for newer players, but also these monsters they're viable into like top PvP right now. So that's pretty cool. So that was the updates that happened in the last year. Now to talk about some of the data stuff. Like last year, I'm not going to delve too deep into this stuff. I'm just going to make a few, few notes from it. So this was the elements and types table. So this shows, I have this on the forum somewhere where I have all the monsters listed, and it shows what the different types are in each of the elements. So how many monsters there are of each type. So if you look at, say, like the top row here on Angelic, it then, as you scan across the different elements, you can see there are 10 in Holy. Angels in Holy makes complete sense, and there's barely any other any angels in the other ones. This is only Legendaries and Mythics, I should note, just because they're the important monsters really. So moving from 2020 to 2021 to 2022, one of the big things that's happened is humanoids have increased massively. Last year, I was saying like, oh, they're about to overtake dragons, which was the one which had the most. This year, they have now. They are 54, and dragons are 53. So the waifu, they're slowly taking over. Those are mostly mythics. So yeah, if you want to counter the newer mythics, basically humanoid killer does the job, and any humanoid killer move is now very, very relevant. So Mantiferno has Man-Eater, which is a very good move, and Mantiferno actually benefited from the Accelerate buff that we just mentioned because it enters accelerated, so at +9 it has a 68 seconds Man-Eater, which is piercing waifu killer basically. So yeah, humanoids, very common. The other thing I wanted to say is beasts are pretty common. So if we just look at this 2022 table and pick out which are the very common monster types, because as time goes on, I think monster types are going to be more important. So just scanning down that, you can see that dragons and humanoids are the most common. I've got 53, 54. Probably, though, some of those dragons are quite old monsters, so they may be used a bit less. Whereas the humanoids, if you're facing mythics, they're going to be pretty common. But otherwise, we've got beasts. They are very common. We've got 33 of them, slightly over 10% of all the legendaries and mythics. Also got robotics. They are next most, 32. Those are the big standout ones. Then we've got some other ones like aquatic, bird, phantom, which, they come up. They're just not super common. The other thing I want to say is that some of the monster types have slowly been getting more support. Like I said, this is the year of Union, and well, Mantis Samurai, which we'll be talking about in this video, is a bug Union monster that everyone has access to. And if you look at bugs back in 2020, there were 12 bugs. That is including 6 Pupipa, which, there's one across each element. To be honest, we're not really using them. So in reality, also you can only use like one in a team because they can't metamorphosis if you have multiple out at a time. So if you ignore those 6, we actually only had 6 bugs in the game back in 2020. The following year, only 7, and now we've had 3 more. Okay, not a huge amount more, but the point is, some of those monster types which had very few monsters in them, we went from 6 to 7. Now we're on 9. It's 9. No, we're on 10. We're slowly getting there. And I think that will become relevant, with some of these union monsters. Some of those those monster types which don't have so many monsters are slowly going to get like strong union payoffs and a few more monsters which then make whatever they're doing really strong. So definitely something to look out for in the future, and I'm going to mention union a few times over the course of this series. The other thing to look at is the monster stats. So this is their stat distribution as well as their speed. This is very numbers heavy, this page. I'm not going to talk about it too much, less than I did the previous slide. So I reclassified speed this year, which is why if you're looking at the little asterisks and stuff, and some of the numbers may not make complete sense if you look at the speed table. I reclassified the speed slightly because we were getting a lot of slow monsters. So it made a bit more sense to split that up slightly more. So I think now the way I've distributed it is a bit better. But if you just look at those tables on the right-hand side, the top one first, the total monsters here. So this is 2019, 2020, the years I've done these reviews for. You can see we got a lot of new monsters in those earlier years. About 60 the first time, then 45. This year we got 31. They are reducing the number of monsters which they release. Also, I should say this is just Legendaries and Mythics. But yeah, they're reducing the number of monsters they release, and I haven't really heard any panic about it in the community. No one's really been asking for more monsters, and to be honest, that's because what they're doing is correct. So there are so many monsters in the game right now. If they kept flooding it with more and more and more, you'd think like, they're just trying to do a cash grab or whatever, but it would do some really negative things. Firstly, it would push up the power level too much, because if you're releasing loads of monsters but they're all rubbish, nobody's going to bother getting them. So if you actually want people to be getting them, and like for there to be a reason to make these new monsters, the power creep needs to happen slightly. And so, it pushes power creep, which is a negative thing. Secondly, there'd be way too many monsters for people to learn. We already have this problem, with the game as it currently is. There's so many monsters in the game to learn. If they kept releasing, 60 a year, well then we'd just have way too many. So reducing that to now 30 is a lot better. And yeah, basically the current state for people is that there are loads of monsters they still need to obtain, especially Mythics, because they're so hard to get, that there's just enough for people to go for, that they don't need to be releasing loads of new monsters. But obviously they need to handle certain problems with the PvP meta and that kind of thing, and if they're only releasing a few monsters, it's hard to do that. So then they'd have to like do nerfs and buffs rather than like new monsters that deal with it. But anyway, that's a slight side. So new monsters, we haven't had like a huge number of new monsters, and you'll see that in these videos that I do this year, that some of them are going to be shorter. I don't know. I don't want to say that too early. There are a few monsters in those videos, so I can talk about them in more depth rather than rushing through as I had to do years ago. So stat distribution, mostly it's kind of the same, going slightly more tanky. As I've said, last year I made that massive deal throughout the videos, saying like, everything's going really tanky. This year, we've still got tanky stuff. We've now got defense boost stuff. So actually the stat distribution tables, they're not displaying how tanky monsters are quite so well, because some of them are like full attack or standard attack, but they have some defense buff going on. And then speed-wise, speed is also reducing slightly. So if you look at the average speed, it's only dropped from 54.5 to 54.2 in the last year, but bear in mind this is an overall average, and we're getting fewer monsters in there, so it's only like 10% of the monsters. So if you think about it, the average speed we got this year is actually like 10 times that difference, so it's more like an average of 51.5% we got this year as the new monsters, compared to the average of all the other monsters that existed before, which is 54.5. Anyway, there's some numbers for you. Some tables if you want to geek out over them, as I've been doing for the last few minutes. So looking at Earth itself, we got past that earlier stuff. Now we're going to do the normal kind of video talking about the Earth monsters. There was actually the most Earth monsters out of all the elements, which is why if you came to this video and you're like, God, it's long, it's because it happens to be, like, I've got the intro stuff, plus also it's the element with the most monsters this year. Yeah, it's just the way it's gone. So anyway, we had 1 new Mythic, 6 new Legendaries, 7 Super Epics. So you can see it's pretty heavily weighted on the Legendaries and Super Epics. We also got 1 0 to 4 star monster. That's a little rock thing that we'll talk about very shortly. Earth, generally speaking, stats-wise, it is second most defensive and slow. Holy is the one that's the slowest and most defensive. But Earth is kind of like, you know, historically been a tankier element, and that's how it is with almost all the monsters. Well, I say almost always, almost all. Obviously, there are some outliers, but generally speaking, that's how it is. There's a lot of plants and beasts in this. Beasts are kind of spread across a lot of the elements, but yeah, there are a fair few beasts in Earth. And like I said, it's the most monsters. So we've got all the monsters on that page. Let's move on, because we need to try and speed through to make sure this doesn't go on for hours. So the themes in Earth, we've got the throw theme. You know, this is like the main bulk of Earth. Loads and loads of monsters here. I've split them up into the different categories here. And there are a few new additions from last year which I've added into this slide. But yeah, basically, most of them both summon and use rocks, which means they're very synergistic with each other. And there's some pretty strong monsters in here. Also some Link stuff in here. So if you're doing Link Earth, it tends to have a fair bit of throw in it. Yeah, cool strategy. It's because it's had more support in the last few years with like actually good throw monsters. It has become fairly popular among some people. But anyway, cool stuff. That's throw. Let's move on. Next we have the Protector Retribution themes. This is one which I kind of like classify myself, because Earth has a lot of protectors, and that kind of synergizes with using Retribution, because those protectors die off, charges Retribution on the other monsters. And I talked through the slide last year, so I don't really want to go through it this year, but you can see there's a bunch of protectors. Then there's, on the right hand side, it's like where things happen when teammates die, like whether they enable the teammates to die, or, you know, what they do, Retribution or generate rocks, that kind of stuff. So a lot of stuff which can go into this. Whether it's a strategy you build around, it can kind of work. It's not necessarily what you really want to do, but it can be like a minor sub-theme, you know, something that's going on in your team while it's playing. And then lastly, we have the theme of poison. So this is something that's been developed over the years slowly. We have now, though, got a fair amount of poison sweepers. So you can see it's just few with a minor aspect, a bunch which are mass poison. Those are basically, they will poison all the enemies pretty effectively. Vine Gazer's a funny one there, because Vine Gazers are annoying. They kill off their teammates, and they don't poison actively, but they have poison or revenge. And because of the way they work, you have to kind of continually kill them to stop them from just like taking over the battlefield. And so when you kill them, it then poisons everything. So then they can poison eater, and you know, you can get into a world of trouble if there are other poison monsters alongside the Vine Gazer. So it's quite interesting poison support. Anyway, and then there's some poison sweepers. So those are the kind of themes that we have in Earth. Let's talk about the new monsters. Alright, so the first monster we have is Lebroid. So this is the one thing that's epic and below. It's a 2-star monster, pretty tanky, and it's obviously a funny joke on LeBron, the basketball player. So it's a little basketball with basketball shoes, I believe. I don't know basketball, but I do know LeBron. Anyway, so what I haven't really seen this get used much at all. It came out at the time of the anniversary. When I say I haven't seen it used, I've never seen it used. So anything I say here is very much like theoretical talk. I haven't used it myself either, but I believe there's a fair amount of potential here. So a few things to point out: it's got it's got full defense and hold ground. So even though, you know, you would think, oh, it's just going to die off easily and that kind of stuff, actually you get a fair bit of value here for 7 cost, because it takes a fair bit more effort than you'd think to kill off. And so for, you know, being a 7 cost monster, it's probably pretty good just with that. In terms of the moves, well, okay, I should say it does have both Protector and Chrono weakness, which can cause you some problems. In terms of the moves, it has a give turn, a shield, and then if you can do both of them, which it's quite slow at doing, then it can start taking out the enemy monsters really well. So yeah, it's kind of like a bit greedy maybe to try and go for this, but I do think that probably there are some setups where you can use this and it works really well. It's just I haven't really thought too much yet about how exactly you'd want to use it. But yeah, if you've got this monster and you've tried out and you have an opinion, do let me know, because I would love to hear some experience of using this monster to know what it's like. But yeah, it seems reasonably good. The only issue I would say is that the pass, giving turn to the teammate with the lowest seconds, is like the opposite of what you want to do with a give turn. You usually want to give it to the highest seconds teammate. So that doesn't seem too great. Shielding a teammate though, that seems alright. And if you can give turn to the Broid, that's probably pretty good. Yeah, that was my thought, I think, when I first saw this monster, is if you can like pass to a give turn monster, give turn back to it, rebound to shield something, then they've got to kill it. Otherwise, you're just going to start, wiping out 3 enemies with Dunk. So yeah, if you could do something like that, probably pretty good. But yeah, we'll see. Moving into Super Epics, we have our first Elfin Dragon Gron. Now, as with last year, the cycles, I'm going to talk about them in the Fire video. Them as a group just makes a whole lot more sense to talk about. These guys cannot work by themselves, so there's no point me talking about it here. If you want to see about this monster, it will be in the Fire video. We'll just move on from it. As you can see, it's pretty low. It's a pretty bad monster. Similarly, Gummy Dragon Lime. This only works with the other Gummy Dragons. I'm going to talk about it in the Fire video, so I'm not going to talk about it here. Again, it's quite mediocre. Yeah, we'll talk about it there. They're not particularly exciting, those two. So moving into the actual Super Epic we're going to talk about is Maple Dragon. Now this one, as you can see, S+ in both General and PvP. This is a top-notch, crazy Super Epic. This is basically a Legendary, or as a friend of mine likes to point out, it's kind of like one of the Mythics, but better. So anyway, this is seriously good. Just first off the bat, full defense and camouflage. This is not going down easily. The fact that it's got Chrono weakness, Sleep weakness, it's weak to 4 different killer moves: Toxic, Chrono, Sleep, and Stun. Yeah, those 4 killer weaknesses. Also Stealth Bane, I guess. It's weak to that. So you'd think like, okay, well, it's going to die easily. Except that a lot of people, they'll use those moves which are the double hitting moves, and so they can't actually kill Maple Dragon in that way. And just the fact that it's got full defense means that actually killer moves can sometimes just, have a hard time killing it. So yeah, tanky stuff. And then it does disruption because it adds a bronze shell next in line. That is key, really, really key, because it just gives you a little bit of extra breathing room. And this with support means that, if it gets a turn and it gets going, it can really help you take control of a battle. Especially because the best move on this is Sleep. So as always, 70-second Sleep can help you take over a battle so well. If they don't kill Maple Dragon, and bear in mind I was just talking about how it's quite hard to kill, if they don't kill Maple Dragon, it can just put their team to sleep. It's not the most reliable thing, it takes a little bit of time, there are many counters to Sleep, but in matches where you don't have a counter to Sleep, Maple Dragon doing Sleep on your team can just, win the battle, basically. So Maple Dragon can do that. Otherwise, it can support Poison, but, to be honest, you're probably not using it with Poison because it's got Sleep. But the Poison Touch can deal with, like, shields, hold ground, that kind of stuff. It can help with the sweeping a little bit. Stun Pulse, because that was nerfed, it's not exceptional, but it comes up sometimes that you want to stun something out of play. And then Give Turn is another big one. So basically you're doing Sleep and Give Turn, and then you can counter counter Hold Ground and Shields with the Poison Touch. So the support this gives for you taking over the battle to win is insane, especially given the Bronze Shell. And the fact that it's hard to kill means it's like, what? This is a super epic? Yeah, it's insane. Like this moveset could be on a legendary and it would be good. You know, we wouldn't complain about it at all. It could be on a legendary that doesn't have full defense and we would be like, oh, this is a good monster. Yeah, it's exceptionally strong. Definitely one of the best super epics in the game. Probably the best one that came out this year. So next we have Redybug. Now this is not quite so high in the tier list, but I haven't seen it quite enough to like know exactly where it stands. It's definitely very, very strong in the teams which it's meant to be played in, and that is Union. So this is a monster to support Reptile Union, and the way it does this is by summoning another monster. It's a bit kind of awkward. I can only show you one here. I'm going to show you the Gold Eyes afterwards. But ultimately what it does is it will pull back a teammate to create that Gold Eyes that comes in, and that will then shield all reptiles. So not only is this a super tanky protector when you're using reptiles, but also you can come in and you can shield the reptiles too. So very heavy support for reptiles. Also it's a stun absorber, the thing that it calls in. So you've got stun protection, you've got a tanky protector. No healing involved, but they can. The Gold Eyes can resummon Redybug, so if it dies and then Gold Eyes gets a turn, it can, do that. It's all good. But you have got other support stuff, like you've got the Purify here. Yeah, it does a lot. It's hard to kind of know what to talk about exactly. But this is surprisingly tanky, like way tankier than you'd imagine, because it's got that full defense and a 50% defense buff. It's super tanky, and because it's got a auto protect, it means that you can't just like go like, okay, that's super tanky, I'm going to throw the really high damage move that will one shot it at it, and I'll throw the other moves at other monsters. Because probably whatever state your team has, there'll be, of the 4, there'll be like 1, maybe 2 which have a move that can kill Redybug easily, or successfully, and then the other 2 want to really be hitting the other enemies. So Redybug as a protector works very, very well by being so tanky. It's I don't know how to scale it tanky-wise. I think it probably tanks as well as a Mythic. That's kind of where it feels. I can't do the numbers in my head quickly enough to figure it out, but I think basically it's like a tanky Mythic. Anyway, so like I said, it supports with Purify. It's also got Counter Strike for damaging sometimes when there's a fire monster, and then the main thing here is the duo attack. So I'm going to move on to Gold Eyes now because I think it makes more sense to continue talking. So this is the thing that gets summoned, and they both have duo attack. So once they're on the battlefield together, they can be one-shotting enemies. This does incredible damage. Gold Eyes doesn't have the stats buff. When you're with reptiles, that's only Redybug. So Redybug's duo attack is stronger, but against buffed enemies in PvE, like say they're buffed, so they just have like the max, the defense cap. Redybug will do, I think, 15,000 damage, and Gold Eyes will do something like 10,000. So it deals with really buffed enemies. So the combo of them in PvE, which I say combo, it's a one monster combo. You just have to use it with reptiles. That is exceptionally strong, and definitely something which newer players should be taking advantage of in PvE. Redybug is a really good PvE monster. I may put it higher on the tier list because I didn't fully consider that when I put it in as S-. So yeah, they can sweep if they're left alone. Gold Eyes has Kinslayer, the other one has Counter Strike, so a couple of the elements they cover with those. Gold Eyes I don't like so much because it is a stun absorber, so if they kill the Redybug and they stun the Gold Eyes, well then Gold Eyes just kind of get stuck there. But if Gold Eyes isn't stunned and the Redybug dies, then the Gold Eyes can kill a teammate to call Redybug. Note that it can kill itself, which is probably what you want to do. But anyway, so that's what you can do with that. And if it gets left alone, it also has Sleep, which we just talked on Maple Dragon how Sleep can kind of take over a game. So Redybug and Gold Eyes, if they get going, which for some reason, if the enemy team just can't deal with what you've got, they get left on the battlefield, they can sweep. Gold Eyes can take control with the Sleep move. They're tanky with shielding the team. There's a lot of really good stuff here from a super epic. So yeah, it does a lot. It's very, very strong in a reptile team.
but you need to have probably, a couple of reptiles around, and if those reptiles care about union, say it's, what's the mythic? Ophidiator. That one is a reptile union monster that works really, really nicely with Redibug. So yeah, very, very cool super epic. I love the design of this. Maple Dragon kind of just like pushed extreme power level, but Redibug I think is a very cool monster that supports a niche archetype, and I love monsters like that. So our fifth super epic is not so exciting. This is a shiny version of Cerazale, which is one of the very early on super epics that was like a limited one. It came out in an event. I never got it. I still don't have it to this day. And it used to be a really strong PvP monster way back in the day. Anyway, this is like a different version of it, and they made it tanky, which the original one should have been. So this is full defense, hold ground, stun immunity. Looks pretty nice. The issue with it is the moveset is not that great. So it can kill off teammates. It's basically got a backstab move. It also can get rid of tokens quickly. Cannibalize token is a fine move. The thing is that both of them are a little bit situational. You can use this as a backstab monster. However, it's quite slow to do that. So like say your opponent's in control, they're killing through your team, your backstab monster comes in, you're like, okay, I want to kill off the teammates that aren't doing anything. Well, normally you'd want high speed on that because otherwise they just kill Cerazale before it gets a turn. Wraith Host is a fairly common option for that. And that's a monster with something like 50% speed. A lot better at the job. 29% speed is just too slow, I think, for actually coming in and giving you that kind of control. So it's not exceptional for that. However, that said, it is a tanky monster with stun immunity with give turn. That's a super epic. And for super epics, that's pretty good going. So that's why it's A in both general and PvP, because it's fine. It is quite good. I've played against it in PvP a little bit, and it was fine. It did the job. Just wasn't exceptional, but it's fine. So that's my kind of assessment of it. Not much more to say. It's a fairly bog standard kind of monster, reasonably good. Next we have the shiny version of Torrentide. Now Torrentide is quite notorious as like one of the best PvE super epics in the game. You can win crazy battles with just Torrentide because it clones itself and has camouflage. And the poison immunity means that, the clones don't die after poison even though they're 1 HP. It's a very, very overpowered monster for that one particular thing. So the shiny version, they decided to change it so it's still got the same idea that it's high speed, it clones itself, but it's now a mark monster. So it will come in and it will mark a random enemy, and then you can cornered snipe that enemy. However, it doesn't have the camouflage, and for that reason, it's a lot weaker. So what made the clone strong was that it had camouflage, whereas if you now like clone next with this new Torrentide, that comes in, and sure, it's high speed, it marks an enemy, it might be able to come in and cornered snipe something, but it's 1 HP, so probably the enemy team could just kill it off before it gets a turn, and then you wasted 130 seconds on your first Torrentide. So I don't think it's that great. It also, this has higher defense, which means that Slayerbane is really weak. The Slayerbane just won't do enough damage, so it's all about that clone next, and, it's all about that cornered snipe, really. So this comes in, cornered snipe something, and then that's kind of it. That said, though, the reason why I haven't put this at just like slap bang bottom of the tier lists is because Mark setups are a real thing. Mark is slowly getting more and more support, and this is something you could just sort of slip into a Mark team and not plan to clone with it, just plan to corner snipe with it. So it will come in, it will mark an enemy which could set up a teammate, or just otherwise set up itself, and then it can get this piercing kill corner snipe. By the time it gets another turn, because you've got a mark team going on, you should hopefully have an enemy marked that you want to kill, and you can just kill it with Torrentide. So Torrentide kind of works as your sweeper. Because it's got the mark protection, we've got the poison immunity, got the half stun immunity, so it can work reasonably nicely as, a reasonably tanky super epic that will sweep for you in your mark setup. That's where I think it can fit. Otherwise, I think they kind of took away the really strong things from the original Torrentide, and yeah, they didn't really kind of give it something else that really makes it stand out other than just this one niche use, which is fine, but you know, it's nothing too crazy. So last super epic we have is Virid Wyvern. This I actually forgot came out in the last year because I think it came out, you know, basically about a year ago, and I also sometimes think it's an epic. I don't know why. I think maybe it looks like an epic in the game or something like that. But anyway, I actually really like the art on this. So this is a Union attack monster, and it's got two different monster types, both plant and dragon. Plant comes up more in Earth, so it can go in an Earth setup. I've seen people use this with Bulbul Basher, which gets a stats boost when it's used with plant monsters. Similarly with Super Shell, that is another plant monster, it's a stun absorber with Union attack. So the three of them can work together pretty nicely. The thing that I have slightly against this, which I have pretty high on the tier lists, but the thing I have slightly against it is its attack is fairly low. So it means that Union attack is a little bit weak. It can kill the squishier monsters, but against anything that's like a bit more tanky, it does struggle a bit. And similarly, Blood Fury does struggle a little bit against those tanky monsters when you got one kill. So I think it's a balanced super epic, rather than like something that's, you know, super strong and use it in Union moves, in Union teams. If the Union attack and Blood Fury did slightly more damage, say this was rounded, or actually, yeah, if it was rounded stats rather than standard defense, I think it would be really, really good. The fact that it's got just slightly too low attack means that it can't be anything exceptional. But the moveset on it is really, really nice. Like, having Blood Fury on a super epic is strong. Union attack is very easy to set up when you've got both dragons and plants, that like, it doesn't take too much team building to do that. And then it heals your team on the entrance. That's like, it's a 50% heal from healing entrance, which is very nice. So yeah, I think people will sometimes undervalue healing entrance, but I do think it's a lot stronger than you'd think, because often when you're fighting a battle, you'll chip down one or two enemies with the intention of making them easier to kill later, or putting them down to like hold ground. And then suddenly you see a healing entrance next, and you're like, oh no, I've got to like hit all those monsters and kill all those monsters that I put to hold ground to kind of get the benefit of putting them to hold ground in the first place. But by doing that, I'm going to bring in multiple enemies at once, which might mean I lose control. So healing entrance, I think, does a little bit more than people would sometimes think. And then pullback's a great move, repulse, great move. Those are really nice on a monster when you have some solid other moves, because they're both quite situational, but very strong in those situations. So I think there's a lot of good stuff going on this monster, and I do think it's strong. When I faced it, it's been annoying, because you can't really ignore it, because the 100-second move that's, you know, almost one-shotting your monsters is good enough. But I do think it doesn't quite reach into that kind of overpowered or, you know, top super epic kind of status. Moving on to Legendaries, we have Amit Tyrant. Now this is a really cool and interesting monster. If you don't know, Amit is from Egyptian... I was going to say Egyptian lore. Oh god, sorry, not lore. Egyptian mythology. Amit is like this god of... Well, I'm going to get it wrong if I try and say it, but I know it's something to do with the fact of he balances your sins against your good deeds in the afterlife, and then decides, you know, kind of whether you lived a good life and that kind of stuff. And so the design here is really, really flavorful, really nice. I love what they did. The artwork as well is, I think, spot on or very close to what Amit should look like. Maybe not with the chains, but I don't know. Yeah, so really cool, really interesting. The moveset, I was very unsure about it when I first saw it. Now, I've played with it lots. It's very good in PvE, and I've slowly come around on it more in PvP. So before going into like the kind of like unique stuff, I want to point out it's got true hit. So this can be used, and this works for PvP too, as part of like a true hit setup, where you give the opponent rockoids, and then you plan to hit around them. This is surprisingly effective in that kind of setup, and PvE that actually works really, really well because the enemy team doesn't deal with Rockos properly. So this can be a monster that's already pretty good for PvE being used to in that strategy to great effect. True Hit's also been buffed now, so it does like crazy damage. So it's great in PvE. Anyway, so that's the True Hit aspect of it, which I think is kind of interesting and quite good. The unique bit of it, though, is the Sin Punishment move. So this kills everything on the battlefield as a kill. Really, really good in Ultimate Challenge and some PvE stuff, where the enemies are like super powerful, and so like to actually kill them you need Death Revenge and that kind of stuff. Sin's Punishment does the job. It is 200 seconds, but that doesn't really matter because like often in those teams, if you're using it with like Aura Dragon and Death Revenge stuff, like you're not really getting any kills. You're just like passively things are dying off and killing enemies. Enemies die as they kill your team off, and so the enemies, a couple of them will have kills and they just didn't die to a Death Revenge, and then Amid Tyrant will just kill those, and it doesn't trigger their revenge. So in Ultimate Challenge, people use all this Death Revenge stuff. Being able to take out the enemy team without triggering their Death Revenge is crucial. So this is a really good Ultimate Challenge monster, otherwise good in PvE, because it can deal with buff monsters, and it's got Mirror Revenge, so you'll get a buff monster when it dies off. The Ascension doesn't really matter, to be honest. You know, that's a flavorful add, I think. That it's like it purifies the spirit or something. Sorry, I don't know the mythology of it, but anyway, that's that. And Repent is lovely, flavorful, but also really good with Sin Punishment, because you can remove kills from your teammates to then mean that you don't kill them with Sin Punishment. So yeah, really cool and interesting design. I think it has more viability in PvP than people will give it credit for, because it's a bit awkward to deal with. The thing with Mirror Revenge that I always find is that it doesn't play as well in PvP as you'd think, because you'd think like, okay, great, I'm going to get an enemy, like just a free enemy, on top of whatever value I get from this monster itself with Mirror Revenge. However, what happens is that often the opponent will be like, okay, well, I can choose what I give them. And so, like, this monster that I've got on my team, I don't really care if they get this. Like, it's actually, like, to my benefit. It could be that you could just kill it easily and then charge a blood move or something like that. Like, often it is the case that they can just give you something that you don't want with Mirror Revenge. So Mirror Revenge doesn't play so well. However, it does with Amid Tyrant, because Amid Tyrant forces you to kill it before it gets a turn a lot of the time. Because if you're kind of winning and you've got that kind of advantageous situation, probably your team has more kills than your opponent's team does. So then, when Amid Tyrant hits the field, if it uses Sin Punishment, it's going to really devastate your lineup, and maybe not do that much to their team. So it tends to force you to then kill Amid Tyrant as fast as possible, because the speed here isn't exceptional, but it's not terrible. So then, yeah, they're forced to kill the Amid Tyrant with something that they maybe don't want to give you. So Mirror Revenge is made a lot better by the fact that Amid Tyrant has Sin Punishment. So yeah, I think this has more viability in PvP than people give it credit for. I'd love to see people using it. When I've faced it, I've been like, oh wow, that's actually that's a pretty good monster in this situation. The one thing I did want to say, I haven't mentioned the secret skill. You may have noticed, I really do not understand the secret skill. I want them to change it, because I don't see why you'd ever want to use it. It's like a worse version of Sin Punishment, because you can only target something that has a kill. So, something that you could kill with Sin Punishment, and it kills that. It triggers a revenge, if they do have a revenge, and then it immediately revives them on 1 HP. So you don't actually remove them, you just set their HP to 1 and remove the kill from them, because they're reset. Why would you ever want to do this? Like, it's not a repulse. It's like a sort of weaker version of repulse that you can only use on enemies with kills, and you could just kill them with Sin Punishment. Like, I'm trying to, maybe I haven't justified it super well when I'm saying it now, but like when I've actually really thought through it, I'd be like, there's not really any use case of this move, and it makes Amid Tyrant cost 16, like +3 cost for a move that basically is useless. It's really weird. Like, if Amid Tyrant had a blood move, it makes sense. You know, you grab a kill in 70 seconds. It's like a Slayer Bane for that, but like it just does not make any sense to me. Anyway, I've talked enough about Amityrant. Let's move on. The next legendary is Bafagouge. I probably butchered that. So this is like Astra Golem. It's not really a shiny version of it, but it's kind of mimicking it in many ways with the stats and everything. The key thing here is it's faster. So I think ultimately it's the same kind of strength as Astra Golem, but it's just it's a different spin on it. So Astra Golem, one of the great things it has is the Swift Fast Strike that you can get a kill with, and then you can start doing the Link Blood Bite. Also, it's got the anti-sleep stuff because it's got Insomnia and Purify, which is always really nice. This instead is anti-poison, but doesn't. And it's only anti-poison because it has poison immunity. But that does mean that the Link Blood Bite with Hold Ground is a little bit better. What this really does is it counters Death Revenge monsters. So if there is a Death Revenge monster at 61% speed, which is good speed, you can instantly kill that and then start doing Link Blood Bite. That's a big deal. That's really, really strong if there's Death Revenge around. So I think this is one of the very well-made counters to Death Revenge that you can bring out in a Death Revenge meta that's very restricted to Link Earth. But it does make Link Earth better at that. Otherwise, Demoralize, it is 160 seconds, but it's a good move at 61% speed. And you can use this with like a give turn to it. Like that was the first thing that I thought when I saw this monster. Was like, great, there are loads of whole ground monsters around. You can demoralize the first turn, give turn to it, and then just start Link Blood Biting. And that seems like a really solid way of doing things. In practice, it's not the most exceptional because sometimes there isn't a whole ground target, and then it does get a bit stuck. But it's certainly a good monster. And when it comes together, it works very nicely. So yeah, cool monster. I really like the design here. I like what they're doing to bring in counters to Death Revenge. This one is to a bit of a niche archetype, but that's fine because we've got other monsters with Payback Killer. So moving on to the next one, we have Jacqueline. So Jacqueline, I'm aware that I spoke a lot about Amityrant, and I don't want to go too long about a load of monsters in this. Jacqueline is one which I could talk a lot about. It's one that got overhyped massively, and I don't think it's that great anymore. It did get nerfed very heavily, and so I think people are probably more on board now with my line of thinking with it. But you can see I have it as B in PvP. I think it's sort of average now, basically. So this makes 3 Vine Eyes in the enemy team when it enters. And it is fully dependent on there being Vine Eyes or Vine Gazers around, which you can use it with a Vine Gazer, or you can kill teammates to turn them into Vine Gazers. That's fine, that all works. It's a little bit clunky, but it does work. And then it can like do insanely high damage with Squash and Duo Attack when there are those things around. If they're not around, it can't really do anything, so it basically has to... the best thing to do really is Sprout Conversion itself to get rid of it, and then start doing the Vine Gazer thing and hoping that works out. But PvE, it is brilliant, 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 because the Vine Eyes are very abusable, and the damage is crazy from Squash and Duo Attack, so this is one of the best monsters that came out this year for PvE, that's in Legendary. PvP... The problem that I always had with this is the Vine Eyes appear in random slots in the enemy team, which means that Jacqueline often gets stuck, unable to do damage moves until you've really cleared through quite a few enemies, and that's a bit more awkward than you'd think. So I personally found she was too unreliable, and when I faced her, it was quite easy to ignore her and then just kill off the other teammates, and she was a bit of a dead weight. Sometimes they got lucky with the Vine Eyes, but often it didn't play out quite as well as they hoped. And then the Vine Eyes, they've now like nerfed by making them 75% chance to just kill themselves. It used to be 30% or 40%, something like that. But now they can really easily remove themselves. So they very often just kill themselves off as soon as they get a turn. And when they do that, they heal the team. So they're not really that like oppressive. A Bronze Shell is better to put into the enemy team. So the Vine Eyes, I personally find them like not even too bad when they go into my team. The only thing I don't like about Jacqueline now when I face her is sometimes she sets up the Vine Gazer stuff and my team isn't super well equipped for dealing with that. But yeah, that's kind of everything I want to say about her. If you want to use her and try her out, go ahead. I do think she's just a little bit awkward and clunky. You do need to be careful how you use her, and to use her with enough other aggressive monsters to get to the Vine Eyes and that kind of thing. I think that's where she works well. The next legendary is Mantis Samurai. Now this is the really cool one that we all got for free. So it's like right at the very beginning of the game you get this Knot style monster, and you can evolve it into Mantis Samurai. I can't remember the ingredients. I do have them somewhere. I plan to make a Mantis Samurai video, which was like a year ago now, and I've got all the footage and stuff, I just didn't make it. But yeah, it's very, very strong. As you can see by the tier list ratings, S- in general, S in PvP. You can use this really easily, and what I love about it is it's a one-on-one monster, so it's probably making a lot of newer players love one-on-one, which if you didn't know is my favourite strategy. So yeah, it doesn't have as high speed as it used to. On release it used to have 75% speed, I think. Now it has 59. That is ultimately because of the union attack. With one-on-one it was fine at that speed, but it was too easy to use it with a bug teammate, and then you just at 75% speed union attack to kill anything you want, which was a bit too oppressive, especially when you used it with Beetle Brute that's also like 60 something% speed or something like that, and that is union attack. The two together can just wipe through the enemy team, and it combos with Frontulate Mave and everything. It's nasty. So they reduce the speed, which does make one-on-one a bit more awkward in the front line. However, I would say it's still pretty good at that, because it's got relatively high defense, not the best, but reasonable, and hold ground. It's quite easy to pull off the one-on-one. I think it's also very easy to put off one-on-one later on in the team. I'm quite a big fan of mid-game one-on-one. I've used that a fair bit now, and Mantis Samurai really hits the spot on that, because it can come in, and if you've got sleeping enemy, you can instant double Dream Hunt, and then use one-on-one, and it's then got Bloodthirst Charge and all the rest of it. It's very strong. So there's a number of ways you can use this. I will cover it more in the video when I eventually make that. But I've covered some of it already by saying bugs for union attack is very strong. Beetle Brute's great thing to use it with there. You also got Onyxia, Arachnodiva. Yeah, there's some other good bugs around that you can use it with. The Flutter Drakes, Lunactia as well. Anyway, that's enough to mention. A bunch of good bugs that you can use it for union attack. Otherwise, you can build around the one-on-one. What's crazy about this is the Fighting Spirit makes Double Zealot's attack actually really, really strong. It doesn't quite one-shot legendaries, but it does one-shot super epics or any storm legendaries, that kind of thing. So it can do that on the first turn, and that's like just a fail case. The instant double Dream Hunt does absolutely ridiculous damage. It's like in the tens of thousands. So for PvE, that's really nice. Yeah, I mean, PvP, you don't really need to be that high. But it is very useful, one enemy sleeping, just instantly kill two enemies and fully heal Mantis Samurai. So that's great for, getting into Bloodthirst. Obviously, you do the one-on-one, you can then instant double Dream Hunt, only wake up one of the enemies, and you hit the enemy that stayed awake, and do that to kind of charge Bloodthirst and stuff. So very aggressive one-on-one, very well suited, very well designed one-on-one, great in bug teams. There's a lot you can do with this. It's a brilliant tool for everyone to get, because like I said, every player gets this monster. So definitely, if you're a newer player, get this, mess around with it, get good with it, and you will hopefully love it. The next legendary is quite an insane one. So this is Rhinoel. It was a Christmas legendary that came out over a year ago now. It is very much a PvP monster, and it's insane in PvP. I recently found in PvE as well, like that the AI likes to just use Detonation Plus, so it's quite good there, but the damage isn't quite high enough. Anyway, so the crazy thing about this is the box chomps it makes do ridiculous damage to sacrifice themselves. They just basically wipe out the whole team, and because you make the two, it's like two sets of four, well, 3 monsters, because the one of them's a box chomp, but like it can kind of just kill 6 of the enemies just from Rhino entering, and one of them's always next in line, so that gives you the kind of like the breathing room for doing whatever to take control. On other monsters which have this stuff, like we just saw Jacqueline, but also then there's I'm trying to remember Tinker Claws, that's it. Tinker Claws and Motor Dragon, those are kind of like the classic ones. And on all of them, the moveset is a bit iffy. You know, it kind of is a bit situational. Like I was saying with Jacqueline, she really depends on there being Vine Eyes or Vine Gazers on the battlefield for her to do anything. Rhino doesn't have that issue. It can, as a fail case, Piercing Blow, which kind of sometimes not one-shots the lower HP Legendaries, but it does definitely one-shot Storm Things or any Super Epics. So that, and you know, it's piercing. So, like, it's a good move, does the job. If anything's been hurt a bit, you can kill it with Piercing Blow. The fact that it's 200 seconds doesn't really matter too much because you've got that box jump that you brought in, that you just made. So you've got a little bit more breathing room than you would normally have. You know, you can always give turn to Rhino. The other thing is it's got the whole kind of Geomagnus setup where you can like Swift Ally Substitute, pull back a teammate, then kill it off with the Gift Exchange Plus to give them a third box jump. Those moves are very fast doing that, and then it can, you know, whatever way it gets a kill, it can 80-second blood move, which is kind of ridiculous. So, you know, the fail case is Piercing Blow, but if you can do the Swift Ally Substitute, Gift Exchange, that's amazing for setting up the blood move, and also it's got Stone Grinder, which, you know, you can hit a whole Grand Monster. Actually, well, you can hit a whole Grand Monster with Solo Bloodcrave, and then it's a sweeper. So this is like a surprisingly good sweeper. There's not like exceptional, but like, you know, it's good enough. On top of the fact that it just has ridiculous passive entrance passive. So yeah, that's Rhino L. It's pretty overpowered. It kind of needs nerfing. I'm amazed that it's sat around for a year and not been nerfed. When I faced it in the past, I found it a bit ridiculous. Now I've got it myself, I've used it, and it is ridiculous. It can also, with Gift Exchange Plus, it's only a single use, but it can remove like any other token disruption that people are doing. So it's a counter to token disruption, which means it's kind of a counter to itself. But yeah, that just makes it, you know, really good extra utility. The Swift Ally Substitutes a pullback, like that's great extra utility. So there's just a lot of really strong things this monster does, and just an insane entrance. So I didn't show the box jump, but like I said, it's basically it detonates itself. There's a few other things to like think about, like you can't really stun because you'll kill off the box jump with stun. You can't really sleep because they can kill off or, you know, otherwise wake up their monsters with the Detonation Plus. So you do have some considerations to make. Also, you can't use it with Earth monsters because it's got Solo Bloodcrave, but ultimately it's just insane. Next is the joke monster of the year, Sagerum. So this is kind of like a joke about the whole waifu thing. You know, the developers, some of them really do not like the waifu either. I am very strongly against them. I just think it's a stupid thing in the market right now. And so we have Sagerum, which is like an old man that's naked, looking very creepy. And he gets overexcited when there are waifu on the battlefield. Yeah, it's obviously a joke with that, and it uses like the mushroom stuff. They like to make joke monsters to do with like rockoids, mojis, mushrooms, like musharoo, that kind of stuff. And so, you know, it should really say the fact that this is a mushroom, it is got one of those joke monsters. Now, some of those are actually pretty good. This particular one I do not think is very good at all. It's F in PvP. I think it's basically unplayable. It's just so slow, and cloning itself, like it doesn't do anywhere near enough whilst on the battlefield. Accelerating Team, Purifying Mist, it's basically like a super epic that does no damage, can easily be ignored. It can clone itself enough that then you actually have to kill it, but then you've slowed your team down with a bunch of Sagerums, so it's just really bad at PvP. PvE though, this is really, really strong for the reason that it's tanky, it can clone, and then it can turn any enemies that hit it into mushrooms. And then basically the AI doesn't sacrifice them unless you put like their other monsters to low HP. So if you don't do that, they're just stuck with mushrooms for the rest of the battle. So it can really lock out the AI if you play it like that. Otherwise, it's kind of an unplayable monster. But yeah, funny design. I don't really know what more to say about it. So moving on, the one mythic that we got this year was Apollonius. This was one of the anniversary mythics that came out at the very end of, like, you know, what I'm covering here. And the anniversary mythics, they were not received super well by the community. People were kind of expecting them to be stronger, and I have to say, this I think is somewhat playable, but nothing special. I think maybe it gets bashed a little bit too hard, but it's hard to say because, like, there's fair points to be made, and I think its design could be a lot better. It's basically a bunch of damage moves and then randomly final bite stuff, and got defensive passives. So I would love to see better kind of support for the final bite setup, and maybe a blood move or something. I don't know. It's nothing too exciting. It's quite boring design. But anyway, going into the actual moveset of it, it counters stealth, it counters fire. Yeah, fine. Like, those moves are okay. Stealth actually, I had a look recently at how many stealth monsters there are in the Mythics. So when you look at like killer type moves like Chrono Killer, Protector Killer and stuff, the percentage of monsters in the game that it can critical is, I don't know, like some percentage that it's like reasonable, but it's not a lot. That if you have an element killer move, like, so for example Counter Slash here, that tends to come up more because elements, it's basically 1/6, and so stealth is actually, I think, somewhere very close to a type an element killer move. So between Stealth Break and Double Counter Slash, you're covering, not quite a third, but probably like 25% of monsters there, which is pretty good. It does obviously come up against some battles where there just is no targets because they're like Link. I was going to say Link Water, but Link Water has stealth stuff. Like, say it's a Link Earth, and it doesn't have any stealth in it. It's just like, okay, great. Apollonius doesn't hit, doesn't have the targets for those moves. But even so, I think those cover a reasonable number of monsters, and I think stealth is becoming more common. That having Stealth Break is very useful. That said, this is, there are better Stealth Break monsters. The Final Bite and Healing Retreat, I don't think this is supported well enough. It does have Misty Shield Entrance and Poison Immunity, so it's a bit tanky. So when it comes in, it will be a bit hard to kill. But ultimately, if they know this monster has Final Bite, they're not going to leave it alive until the end. The AI doesn't really leave it alive until the end. So Final Bite just doesn't really get to, you don't really use that. And so Healing Retreat, it's not really worth having +3 cost on the monster to use that. So I think that kind of cuts both of those moves out. You don't really want that. So ultimately what this does is it comes in, it's a bit tanky from the Misty Shield Entrance and Poison Immunity, and then it has a few damage moves, so it can counter stealth, it can hit fire like that. Those are both piercing moves, obviously. And then you've got Deer Smash. So Deer Smash is the kind of fail case move. It does a lot of damage, so it's guaranteed kills. And I think this is what pulls this monster into like the kind of playable, but nothing special, is that it can simply use Deer Smash every 130 seconds, or 110, to kill a random enemy repeatedly. And that is not easy to just leave around. It's not exceptional. It will kill things that you don't want to kill, but for the opponent, it's quite hard to leave Apollonius around because it will be killing off their team at a fairly regular pace. So yeah, there's a bit of damage reflection. It's not massive, I don't think. I can't remember the exact percentage, and it negates revenges. Fine, cool. The fact that it hits a random target though is the issue. So yeah, I would say generally speaking, using Apollonius, the way you want to use it is kind of in the last 1/3 of your team, probably, because it's nothing exceptional. It's not going to do amazingly well in the battlefield. It's not the kind of monster you want to sit out there for ages, because it can only kill certain things or kill randomly. But towards the end of the game, where all you need is just more firepower, and having something that comes in that's like actually a bit awkward and difficult to kill, and can reliably get kills, can maybe counter something that has come up, like maybe they've got a bunch of camouflage and you're struggling with that, then Apollonius can come in and do that, and it's not going to sort of stick around and be a problem because you're at the end of the team, close to the end of the team, and you just need that firepower going through. So I think she's fairly good towards the end of a team, as just kind of you throw it in there and she does the job. I do have Apollonius awakened, and I've used her a bit. I have a very large collection, so I've basically got better monsters, and I found that she was fine, but I could do better things in my team. For someone with a smaller collection, I think she can do the job. She can be quite good. But obviously there are better mythics out there. So yeah, there we go. That's everything about Apollonius. I think I said Apollonius, the name, in a different way every single time I said it there. But anyway, we've gone through all the monsters now. There are a lot of them. I know we're getting along in this video, but here we go. So these are the highlights from this year, the hype list. And these monsters, I think they're awesome. Like, Earth got some really strong things. So first, let's look in the top left. We've got Redybug for the reptile support. I talked about this at length. Very, very strong for supporting Reptile Union. Yeah, I think it's stronger than I originally gave it credit for, and when people have reptiles that they want to play with and they use this, they're probably going to get really, really excited about what Redybug can do and how good it is for supporting that. Yeah, it's also got this modern style design that we've seen mostly this year, but like probably the year before a bit too, where they've got the defense buff and stuff and high defense. That full defense plus the defense buff means it's extremely tanky. We really need strong attacks to take it out. So yeah, it forces that. Bottom left, we've got the Bafagorge. So this, like I said, it's the Death Revenge counter, really nice for that. And otherwise, strong monster for Link Earth. Link Earth has steadily been getting more and more support, and I think Bafagorge is a really good addition to that. So for any Link Earth team, they probably want to include it, and they'll have a good time. We've got the free legendary Manta Samurai. Like that's just amazing. I talked about that. I'm not going to go on about it more. I'm going to make a video about it. I don't know exactly when, but I really want to make the video about it, about how to use it, because I think it will be good for newer players. And it's a very strong monster. And then on the right, we've got the two basically overpowered monsters. The Super Epic that's maybe even Mythic strength, and the Legendary, which is like a strong Mythic. They're both crazily good for PvP. Definitely monsters, if you want to pick up like strong monsters to use and just make strong PvP teams, pick them up. I'm seeing them more and more in PvP teams these days, and I'm not surprised. Like they're probably going to become so ubiquitous that Rhinoel will get nerfed or something, and Maple Dragon will just be like, it will just stand as like one of the best super epics in the game for years to come. Looking at the strength of these monsters, those are the highlights that we just looked at, and obviously this kind of has those highlights there. But this is looking overall at the new monsters that we got. So there's quite a few here. Only one Mythic, which was a really bad one. Well, bad. It was playable, but like nothing too special. And then we've got the really notable thing here is the Legendaries with very high quality. We've got a couple which are exceptional in PvE, Jacqueline and Sage Room, mainly because they make tokens and like the AI doesn't deal with the tokens, but they're very strong PvE monsters. Amityrant and Manta Samurai 2, both very strong in PvE. And then we've got some really good PvP monsters for Legendaries 2. So I think the Legendary quality in Earth was very good this year. Although I would say 3 are kind of like less good in PvP, but they're still kind of roughly around the middle, to be honest. 2 of them, other than Sage Room. And then the super epics, we got the one crazy one. Average was around A, basically somewhat playable in the right teams. Is kind of how it is for those super epics. And generally speaking, looking across it, you probably got this idea when I was looking through it. There was a lot of Union and tokens particularly in Earth here. We've got Maple Dragon, Rhinoel. Well, if you just look at the across the top, actually, was it 3? Jacqueline, Rhinoel, and Maple Dragon. Yeah, but like, very notable strong monsters got deal with tokens. So yeah, that's what we got on Earth. That's how strong they are. Looking pretty good. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. This is the first of the series. We're going to have 5 more videos which should be coming out once a week. So stick around for them. I won't go on any longer because I've talked for quite a while this video. But I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in a video soon.